Hello, and welcome to the C3 Method podcast with your host, Robert Polenic. Our goal is to educate you in everything health and fitness related with a clear, concise, and customized approach. We want you to know what you need to know and how to apply it in a way that fits you best. Today's podcast number 2307. This is our random question podcast for the week of August 11th, 2025. Okay. If you'd like to submit a question for the podcast, you can do so on our website, which is www.c3method.com. 3 is spelled out T-H-R-E-E, so it's C-T-H-R-E-E method.com. You can also reach out on Instagram and YouTube under the name C3 Method. You can find us and follow us, but you can also submit your questions there as well. Okay, let's get into this week's questions. Question number 1. What level of diet adherence is necessary to make progress? If I mess up a day on my diet, how much does that set me back? Really good question. The generic answer that's actually still true is how much adherence is necessary to make progress? More than you currently do. If you're not seeing progress, anything better than your current degree or percentage of consistency, however you measure it, anything better than what you're currently doing will create progress. That's not a fun answer, but that actually is the truth. I like saying that answer though, because let's say, for example, I was going to say that you have to be perfect 7 out of 7 days a week, and you're now currently averaging 4 out of 7. Well, you're going to say, how in the hell am I ever going to get to 7? I might as well just quit. And thankfully, 7 out of 7 isn't necessary. Whereas if you're at 4 and it's like, okay, well, I just have to get to maybe on average across 4 weeks, which would be 28 days, maybe I can average 4.5 days or 5 days of successfulness per week. Well, that's awesome. That's going to create progress. So anything more than you're currently doing does create progress because you're progressing what you're doing. And then if I look at like a more concrete answer to give you some actual parameters, for general population, what I ask them to do is most diet structures I use. There are different structures for different clients, but the most common one is we give a daily calorie range. That range is different per person depending on their goals and all these other things. But let's say, for example, the range is 2,200 calories to 3,000 calories. If they're anywhere in there, successful day. And then maybe we have a protein minimum per day. Maybe I'm asking them to get 160 grams minimum of protein per day within that calorie range. So that's their parameters. For the general population, most people, they will make a rate of progress that they'll be happy with if they are successful in those parameters 5 out of 7 days a week. That's like 71%. So it's a passing grade. If you think of high school, or at least when I was in high school, 70% was the lowest you could get and still pass. So 5 out of 7 days a week is like getting a D. It's maybe a little D for depressing, but that is a level of adherence that gets you something. You're going to see something, and can you do a little bit more to get more progress? Absolutely, but anything less, you're really not going to see anything happening. So even if somebody's only 50% adherent, they're probably not going to see much. So a good bottom to aim for would be 5 out of 7 days, being within the parameters. And these parameters are just calorie range and protein. If you notice, I'm not saying a percentage of carbs, percentage of fats. It has to be these foods, not these foods. It has to be this time of the day, not that time of the day. None of that stuff, really matters in the grand scheme of things. There are conditional ways in which all that matters, and for individuals in which all that matters. However, if we're looking at just diet adherence, if you're within a general appropriate calorie range, a protein minimum, 5 out of 7 days a week, you're going to make pretty good progress. Now, for my more advanced athletes, this would be, bikini, wellness, figure, physique, men's physique, classic physique, bodybuilding, so aesthetic type athletes that are going to get on stage. Whether they're new to competing or whether they're IFBB pros or drug tested pros, I work with all of those in between. We're trying for 7 out of 7. We really try our best not to miss anything, especially during contest prep. So if we're doing a contest prep that's 12, 16, or even 20 weeks, we don't want to miss a day. It happens from time to time, but we need to analyze why it happened. We need to learn, we need to adjust and aim for that to never happen again. But they are aiming for 7 out of 7 within those type of parameters. When I have strength-based athletes, we still aim for 7 out of 7. Their performance is dependent on calories and protein, among a million other things. But on a non-training day, if they miss those numbers, it's not going to impact them as much because they're not performing that day. They're not lifting. However, on a training day, that's going to be very important. So we do put extra emphasis to make sure they hit their numbers on strength days, training days, rather than non-training days. We don't want to miss anything, but we really, really, really never want to miss a training day. And then for all my sport athletes, same kind of conditions is any day they're supposed to perform, any day they're active, we want to place greater priority on those days. If they have an extended, say, 4-day weekend, maybe we'll loosen the reins a little bit, let them have a little more leeway, and then tighten things back up as they come back in, depending on the season of the sport and what their goals are over time. Some of the people I work with are like they qualify for the Olympics, they go to the Olympics, and those are going to be like 7 out of 7, perfect, perfect, perfect. Whereas some people are more recreational type athletes, and that's going to be a little bit looser. So that gives you a little bit of everything. What I would always recommend people do is just, if you start tracking your adherence now and you want better progress, do anything better than what you're currently doing. Any marker of improvement creates improvement, and then work your way to 5 out of 7 days. If you want to continue to make more progress from there, you've got to get to 6 out of 7, then eventually 7 out of 7, where if you miss, you analyze the hell out of why it happened, make a game plan for adjustments you can make, so that way you can reinforce that it won't continue to happen. Anybody who I work with that is elite or advanced, they very, 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 very rarely make the same mistake twice. Very rarely. And if they make it twice, they never make it thrice. They never make it a third time. So it depends on what your emotional and mental capacity is for where you are at the moment, but then also what level of success you want to get to. Okay. Next question we have, do you change your training now that you're wanting to get leaner? So I've talked about it in other podcasts. I am aiming to lose body fat at this time of the year. So last year I was up to 297 morning weight. I was walking around over 300 pounds at 6 foot tall. My body fat percentage would have been somewhere around 25%. So I was, in my mind, chunky, but that's actually relatively lean for being 300 pounds. I was happy to be at that goal. It was something that I had worked towards, and that was a goal of mine. When I was younger, as a teenager, I used to watch World's Strongest Man competitions, and at 6 foot tall, it seemed like 300 pounds was a minimum I'd have to be to ever be that big and strong. So that was just something I always had in my mind, so I wanted to do it. I then dieted down by the end of last year to 277, and then I've been dieting through this year, and I'm now at 227, and my goal is to get super shredded, as lean as I can get before the end of the year. So their question is, did my training change as I want to get leaner? No, I do not change my training. I like bodybuilding style training. That's the way I train. So it might be like for example, today is going to be abs, middle delts. Delts is short for deltoids, which is a fancy word for shoulders. So just the middle part of my shoulder, and then biceps. It's a lower intensity day because tomorrow is legs, and tomorrow is a quad focused leg day. And then I have the next day is like abs and chest and triceps. So I break them down into body parts and I train like a bodybuilder. I have done competitive powerlifting before, competitive strongman before. I've trained CrossFit athletes and done their workouts with them. I've trained CrossFit athletes to like the CrossFit Games and stuff. So I've tried a bajillion styles of training, but my preference and the one that I like to do for myself most of the time is bodybuilding. I do not change that. When I want to get leaner, I change my nutrition, and then maybe I would add cardio. I tend to lean more towards higher intensity, short duration cardio, such as like a morning 15, 20 minute blast on like a step mill. Like we have a Bowflex machine here at home. It's an elliptical, but it actually has a vertical foot pathway rather than a horizontal foot pathway. So you get much more of a lower glute focus. It's almost more like a step mill. I love it. It's awesome. So I'll use that for short, maybe 10 to 20 minutes, somewhere in there, where it's like a sustained high intensity, or I'll do intervals. But that would be the cardio that I would choose. I don't really measure daily step count because it doesn't burn a lot of calories. It's pretty insignificant. There might be some awareness of if my normal daily step count is 8 to 10,000 and all of a sudden I have a 2,000 day, I want to be aware of that if there's high degree of fluctuations. But the calorie difference of me doing, say, 4,000 steps versus 6,000 steps is negligible. It doesn't mean anything. So I don't really care too much about step count. I don't watch that. So I train and I lift weights, and then I would add a little bit of cardio if I need to. I don't change my training style. I'm not going to all of a sudden do lighter weight and higher reps. That would, if that's not what built my muscle, it's sure as hell not what's going to keep the muscle while I'm in a calorie deficit. So I don't change my training. Now, subtle changes that I might make is maybe I would train body parts. Well, actually, I don't really make them. I don't make the changes. I'm trying to give an example of what I might do rather than just saying what I do. And what I do is I don't make any changes. It's all nutrition based. And then if I need to, I would change my cardio. So that's just the truthful answer. Next question we have, do you ever wear a lifting belt? When I did powerlifting and strength-based training, absolutely. So if I was doing anything over around 85%, I would, for squats and deadlifts, I would wear a belt. Other than that, I don't wear a lifting belt. I've never really got into it when I was younger. Even though I'm well aware of them, I don't like the idea of wearing a belt. You'll see even like old school kind of bodybuilders wear a belt from time to time. I personally don't like it because it tends to promote that a person pushes their stomach into the belt to create stability. That is counterproductive in a few ways. One main way is you are now relying on an external support for stability rather than just building all your core muscles to create the strength within yourself. When you rely on something external, you're more susceptible to injury, whereas if you just develop all that strength internally, you are much more resilient to injury. And then in bodybuilding world, I started lifting weights at a skinny fat 165 pounds. I've been as high as I said 297 morning weight, 300 pound walking around weight. But my waist has always been very controlled. I don't have abdominal separation. Like the word you might hear is diastasis recti, which is related to pregnancy or obesity, where the ab wall starts to thin out and you'll actually see the abdominal muscles start to spread apart. You'll see this in very large bodybuilders. I never wanted that to happen for myself. I don't like the aesthetics of it. So I would shy away from a belt or anything where I was pushing out because that forces that expansion concept of the muscles. So I don't even like doing chest supported rows if the pad, the chest support pad, is only on my abdomen, not up into my rib cage. I will not do it that way because I have to push my stomach out to create the rigidity and stability, which I don't want to do. So I am not a fan of lifting belts unless I'm doing max effort lifts, squat and deadlift at over 85%. I will then wear a belt. However, I don't push out into the belt. I want to get a nice deep belly breath and brace and hold like someone's going to punch me. And the belt is there just in case I lose position. I'm not using the belt as a brace by pushing into the belt. Okay, next question. Pros and cons of using wrist straps. Okay, wrist straps would be devices you wear to help with grip. I don't see any cons. I'm actually a big proponent of wrist straps. The main reason why is you'll see those when a person is wanting to train muscles or a movement, but their grip is a limiting factor. If you do not use the assistance of the wrist strap, then your grip will be what you train to maximal exhaustion, maximal fatigue, maximal stimulus, not the other muscles. So for example, in bodybuilding training, if I want to train my back, I want my back to be fully exhausted, fully stimulated. I want the back to take the brunt of everything I'm giving it. However, if my grip is the weakness and I can't continue a set because my grip gives out, not because my back gives out, then that isn't a back exercise, it's a grip exercise. Whatever dies first is what the exercise was for. That's what it'll stimulate the most. So if my grip gives out, then whatever I did was a grip exercise until my grip gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, which can take several months. And then all of a sudden you're just hindering the growth of the intended muscle. So I would use wrist straps, and then I would train my grip an external from that is I would add that at the end of the workout or add it at other workouts. So I would do grip training separately than my back training. I wouldn't want to use my back training to train my grip. So therefore straps can help with that. If we look at strength-based athletes, same concept is if you're aiming to improve the performance on an event, whether that's deadlifting, farmer's carries, or whatever, you want to maximize the muscles of that movement, not just your grip. If your grip is a problem, train your grip individually. And then when you train those movements, use wrist straps so that way you can maximize the muscles involved in the movement, which is probably what your intention is. So I do like using wrist straps. If you have a grip problem, train your grip separately. I actually had a hand injury back in the day. I was moving something for a client and I tore some connective tissues in my hand. My pinky and my ring finger didn't work very well on my right hand. I actually couldn't really hold anything. I couldn't even unscrew like a pasta jar or something. So I had to do a lot of grip training for that. So when I trained my back, I would use wrist straps, and then I did grip training separately, and I was able to still hit my best PR deadlift ever, which was 700 pounds after the hand injury, because I did the grip training separate and made sure I still maximize my deadlift training, maximize my back focused accessory training using the straps to help with those. Okay. The next question we have is a mindset question. When you're dieting to lose fat, how do you manage the mental side of feeling weaker in the gym? Okay. When you're dieting to lose fat, if you feel weak in the gym, it's mostly going to be nutrition related. We're maybe underfeeding ourselves related to when our workouts are. For example, I've helped tons of athletes, strength athletes, drop, for example, in powerlifting, they may drop a weight class, but we still hit PRs and they still got stronger. So I recently had an athlete I helped go from a 242 down to 220 weight class, and he still hit a ton of PRs even though he dropped 20 some pounds. So just because you're losing body fat does not mean you need to get weaker. You might feel weaker if you're mistiming your calories, if you have too severe of a deficit, if we're not managing hydration, sleep quality, which can sometimes be impacted by the style of a diet. So there's a lot of things we would be looking at nutrition-wise, and then the impact of our nutrition and hydration, to where you don't actually have to get weaker when you lose body fat. If you're losing 20, 30 pounds, there's no reason why you need to be losing strength. I have one of my clients, she's an elite level powerlifter, and we have an elite total in 4 different weight classes. So she sure as hell hasn't gotten weak by going up and down, and we've done that over a couple different years and different times of each year. So we might have one year where we drop 20, 30 pounds, and that's from 165, maybe she then competes at 132, and she hits an elite total in both. So you can certainly get stronger while losing body fat. It just takes a very controlled and consistent way of managing your nutrition. Now, you might feel weaker. Bodybuilders, for example, when they're dieting, they can often feel flat, meaning their muscles don't feel like they get as much of a pump during their workouts. Maybe they have a little bit lower energy levels going into the workout. So for cases like that where we feel weaker, it's a perception issue. Timing your calories to be higher pre-workout is very helpful, because that way you feel fueled. You have the energy from the food you ate. You also have the mindset that, oh man, I just got to eat, I better have good energy, or I'm going to have good energy. So you get a little bit of a placebo effect. Then we will also use caffeine-based supplements or energy-based supplements. Be very mindful to keep their usage very low away from workouts, so that we can use them leading into workouts and they have good efficacy and the person gets that little bit of a mental boost. We also want to just work on realizing that a lot of performance is perception-based. So, just because I'm in a little bit of a calorie deficit does not mean that I am going to be weak. I will not accept that. I'm going to go in, I'm still going to hit my numbers, I'm still going to crush everything. Now, that perception really only helps assuming your nutrition is on point, hydration's on point. Maybe we've played around with other supplements to make sure they're timed well. And then you kind of fill in that last little gap with just a mindset of not accepting that you're willing to go, like to do less. Now, we don't want to, again, you don't want to cause an injury and force something that isn't there that day for the body. So maybe you're going in and you normally do 405 for 5, and you do it for a set of 3, and you're like, holy crap, that was horrible. If I were to try a 4th or a 5th rep, I might not get it or I might get injured. Well, then don't do that. But then we would analyze, okay, how was my food? How was my sleep? How was my stress? How was my hydration? And make sure we maximize all those things. When you look at strength, you can get stronger through 3 main ways. One is technique, so improving your technique, and that can be done whether you're in a calorie deficit or not. So you want to analyze the hell out of your technique and make sure you're doing things super efficiently, so that way your strength expression can continue to increase. Then we have the mental strength, and that's how we approach our lifts. Do we approach them confidently, or do we approach them assuming we're going to be weak? So the more we can approach things confidently, the more we can get our mind in the right place to attack the lifts, whether we have the food support or not. That helps as well, because again, it helps strength expression. Then we have just physical strength, and that's actually our strength capacity, our strength ability. If we are in an appropriate deficit to lose body fat but to sustain muscle tissue, there's no reason why we should be performing less. You have the same amount of muscle you did last time. So there really shouldn't be a drop in strength. That is my answer to it. Now, another answer we have is to recognize that if you're making large weight changes, if you're going to compare, say, somebody who competes at 308 and they want to drop down to 242, you are going to have to set new PRs. The PRs that you set along the way, so maybe you go 308, then 275, then 242. As you go to 275, you want to say, hey, maybe at 308 I could do 500 for 2, but now I'm only 280 and I still got 500 for 1. That is a PR because I've never done that before at 280 pounds. So as your weight changes, you would set PRs related to weight. So you have your PRs at 308, maybe you have your PRs at halfway through, say 285, and then you have your PRs at a competitive 275. And then you might have PRs at 260, then PRs at 242. So you can say, oh, I remember when I was 242, I could deadlift this, but when I was 275, I could bench that. So you just start to set new PRs, realizing that if I'm making 20, 30 pound weight differences, my leverages are going to be different. I'm just bringing a different body to my training at that point. So therefore, I'm going to be setting new PRs. For myself, I competed in the 308 class, the 275 class, and the 242. So I did have PRs for different classes. And I knew that, like, for example, the bigger and heavier I was, my bench tended to be better. But actually, as I got a little bit lighter, my deadlift was better. My best ever deadlift was actually my lightest competitive weight. And it just happened to be that felt better. My starting position was better because my belly wasn't in the way. It was interesting to see that my bench was better when I was heaviest, my squat was best somewhere in the middle, and my deadlift was best when I was lightest. So you might start to find that. And maybe you might find is, okay, as I'm losing weight, my bench is going down, but my squat mobility is better, my deadlift mobility is better, so my overall total is going up. So an individual lift might drop for a little bit, but your collective total strength might actually be going up. So there's a couple ways you can look at it, is look at collective total strength rather than individual lift strength. You can also look at what was my PR at this body weight versus another body weight, and then also realizing that strength is not solely dependent on body weight. We can improve our technique, we can improve our mindset. If we set up our diet correctly, we have the same amount of muscle mass, even if we're losing body fat, and we can time our food correctly to have good performance. There's a lot of things we can do. You don't need to lose strength when dieting. Cool. Okay. The next question we have is, I heard the phrase, if you're flat, you're losing fat, said in a YouTube video recently. The person is dieting for a wellness competition and was saying how when she diets, she feels softer and less muscle details in her photos. I've noticed this to be true for myself as well. When I diet, I feel skinny fat, and it really impacts my motivation. I was wondering how you manage client motivation during a diet related to this concept. So if we're looking at aesthetic athletes, now, bikini, wellness, figure, physique, men's physique, classic physique, bodybuilding, I think those are all the categories now. I think there's actually a fit model. I don't even know. There's a million categories. So aesthetic competitions. That phrase, if you're flat, you're losing fat, is true to some degree, more for others and less for others. But what that refers to is when we have a normal intake of food, we have a normal, hopefully, consistent amount of carbohydrates, sodium, and water intake. Those three things, when combined together, form glycogen in our muscle cells. And that essentially kind of like puffs up our muscles. So you're essentially putting water in a water balloon. The water balloon gets bigger the more water that's in there, right? If we're eating normal carbs, normal sodium, normal hydration, our balloons, our muscles, are going to be a normal size. If I am now creating a calorie deficit, it's probably in part going to come from carbohydrates being reduced. You're going to likely reduce your overall food intake, which can negatively impact sodium, meaning you're going to intake less sodium. Hopefully you don't drink less water, so water's not a problem. But if we have less carbs coming in, potentially less sodium, even if water's the same, we're going to be forming less glycogen. So therefore, we're going to have less water stored in our muscles, so they're going to be smaller in appearance. That is what the person is referring to, is by being flat means that your water balloons, your muscles, aren't as full as they are normally. And therefore you feel smaller, you also feel squishy and soft compared to what your normal feeling would be. That is part of the process. One of the nice things is eventually that kind of lessens, normalizes, and then as you get leaner, you start to see more muscle definition and it looks really cool, and you don't notice yourself being flat as a negative because you can still see new lines, new shapes, new things happening. But during the first part of the diet, when you experience the reduction of glycogen, but you're not super lean yet, it just looks like you're fat and small. So somehow you went from fat and full to fat and small, and you're like, well, this sucks, That is true. It's just part of the process. Number one, understanding that that's going to happen helps. Number two is recognizing that when you are flat, you're likely losing body fat. So it's actually a productive moment. This is something I think of with hunger. When I'm dieting and I feel hungry, assuming it's an appropriate level of hunger, I'll tell myself like, oh, this is great. I'm hungry right now, but that's good. That means my body's gonna be chewing off some body fat. I know my next meal is coming at X time. I'll just enjoy the fat loss until I get that meal, and then I'm gonna enjoy the hell out of that meal. But that's how I kind of look at hunger, assuming it's an appropriate frequency, appropriate amount. So we can look at that the same way when it comes to feeling flat, is saying, okay, I feel flat. I know I'm kind of squishy right now, but this is how I get lean. This is how I'm going to look, hard and muscular. This is how I'm going to get where I want to get. This is just part of the process. So just like having to eat consistent meals is part of the process. Just like having to do maybe cardio is part of the process. Having to feel flat is part of the process. So just accepting that that's something we endure, it will eventually lessen and go away. So just kind of, keep your nose to the grindstone, as they say, keep focusing on your daily to-dos, and eventually that will fade and you'll start to get to the point where you can see all the lines of muscle definition and it feels great again, and you don't notice as much that you're flat. So that would be my advice, is just accept that it's part of the process. Use it as motivation to say, okay, I'm flat. That means I'm getting leaner. This is awesome. This is what I want. This is how I'm going to get where I want to get. Cool. The last question we have is a business question. In a recent podcast, you gave advice to treat yourself as your first client, meaning prioritize your progress since you are a physical representation of your knowledge. So they're referring to if you're a personal trainer. So if you're a personal trainer, one of the pieces of advice I gave recently is to treat yourself as your first client. How do you balance prioritizing your needs, parentheses, most important, nutrition, with the demands/pressure of maintaining and growing your business, along with client responsibilities, family responsibilities, and general life responsibilities, parentheses, appointments, and such? Any advice is greatly appreciated, and if you don't mind me clarifying, the more specific the advice, the better. Okay. How do you manage prioritizing your nutrition needs with everything else going on? Make it as simple as possible, but still effective. So I do the same thing I have my clients do, which is good. Is I have a calorie range I aim for every day. On days I don't struggle as much with hunger or energy, I'll push a little bit harder into that range, push for more of a deficit. If I'm feeling like crap and I'm super hungry, maybe I have a lot of stress going on, I'll lessen the deficit and just kind of enjoy the food and make sure that's not super stressful for the day since I have other things going on. So I have my parameters, but my parameters aren't I have to eat X number of calories every day. So if my target was 2,666, I know I'm not going to get that every freaking day, like to the sixth calorie. So I just aim for a range, knowing that anywhere in the range is productive. Again, I use the BMR calculator thing and figure that all out, and then trial and error with myself to fine tune it. But I know there's a range. I then have my protein minimum, and I allow myself to eat not anything that gets within those numbers, but I have my daily normal foods. Like I like cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, chicken and rice, all the normal things. But if I'm out and about, my wife and I are busy, and I'm like, well, I'm probably not going to want to take, a tub of cottage cheese because we don't have access to refrigeration. I actually freeze protein bars in our freezer, and I'll grab one out, and we'll take that with us as we go. The reason why I like to freeze it is we live in the Carolinas. It's hot as hell sometimes. So if it starts frozen, it doesn't get melty and mushy as soon. So I like to freeze the protein bars and then take them with me that way. So before we leave the house, we grab some things. We also have a tin of cashews in our car, along with a tub of protein powder. So even if we're out and about and we get caught somewhere, we can just stop anywhere, get some water, mix in the protein, eat the cashews. That's some calories I got in my face, relatively healthy, better than stopping for crappy fried foods or something. You can also stop at a gas station, a grocery store. There's tons of access to healthy food decisions if you're willing to take 5 minutes to do that. So it's a choice. You have to prioritize it enough to take 5 to 10 minutes to do it. But if you won't take 5 to 10 minutes to do it, it doesn't mean that much to you. That's probably going to anger some people, but it's kind of true. If you're willing not to, if you're not willing to sacrifice anything, I'm super busy and I can't stop for 5 minutes, I'm just going to have to miss my meal. Well, then you're thinking that thing you're doing is more important than yourself and your health and your progress and all the goals you want to achieve for the rest of your life. You won't stop for 5 minutes? That's ridiculous. Stop for 5 minutes, get your food in your face, and keep moving. Understanding, though, that it can be cashews in a car and protein powder rather than being, chicken, rice, and broccoli is great. It's helpful to know that there's leeway with what you eat, assuming you get within your calorie range and your protein minimums. And then maybe you end up eating most of your food at the end of the day or the beginning of the day. Your experience of the day might feel better or worse. So maybe you're holding more water around your midsection because you were super stressed and we underate at the beginning of the day. As long as you get your calories in at the end of the day, get your protein in, and then try not to do that again the next day, the water retention will normalize, your energy will normalize, your emotional mental state will normalize once you get some sleep. So you might have some variability in how you feel if your food varies a lot. But that is how I manage it. Is I know the minimums that'll make progress is calorie range, protein minimum, get that in regardless of what I have to eat to do that. And then to make things super easy, like I said, I freeze protein bars, I order foods off Amazon, I do grocery cart orders through Instacart. I make sure that food is available. It's around the house. And then if we're out and about, we will stop at a gas station. I would stop at a gas station and get food and show up to a doctor's appointment 5 minutes late before I would show up on time without the food. Is that unfortunate for the doctor? Probably, but they're never on time anyhow, so who cares? That kind of thing. And they'll live. I want my goals. So it's a little selfish, possibly, but I'm okay with it. So you have to do what you're okay with. So those are some specific examples. It's just knowing what's the minimum effort that still makes progress and then doing it. Like taking action, doing it, planning it accordingly. The night before every day, say what's going on tomorrow. What are my appointments? What are the things I can't move? When would I eat based on those things? If you don't do that the night before, do it the morning of. If you didn't do it the morning of, do it throughout the day. You want to plan, when am I going to eat? When am I going to exercise? What are the things I can move? What are the things I can't move? Who can I ask for help if I get into a bad situation? So if you missed lunch and you're like, dang it, anyhow, I'm going to go home and I know I don't have any food. Maybe you have a friend. Maybe you have a spouse. Maybe you have a family member that can get food for you. Maybe you can do DoorDash. Maybe you can do Instacart and have the food arrive by the time you arrive home. It's just taking the steps to make sure that you account for what you need when you need it, regardless of what it takes to account for it. That would be the advice. I don't know if that's good advice because you've probably heard all of that. It's just application. It's trying it and realizing that half the time it's going to go right, half the time it's going to go wrong. When it goes wrong, figure out, how could I have approached this differently? What could I have done differently to influence this the next time this moment happens again to possibly get a better outcome? So it's trial and error. So that was hopefully enough of an answer that you feel like you got an answer. That is all of our questions for this week's podcast. If you would like any help with training nutrition, any kind of one-on-one coaching, that's what we do. You can reach out to us on our website, which is www.c3method.com. 3 is spelled out T-H-R-E-E, so C-T-H-R-E-E method.com. You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube under the name C3 Method. If you do find us, please follow us. We share new and different information on those channels every day. And I think that's everything. If you like the podcast, please share it. The more people share it with, the more people we can help. Okay. Well, as always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.